"Happy birthday to me," I whispered, watching through the car window as Boston's familiar streets blurred past. 73 years on this earth, and here I was, dressed in my favorite blue dress and pearl earrings, gifts from my late husband Henry, being driven to what my son David had promised would be the best birthday lunch ever, Mom. The weight of Henry's watch pressed against my wrist. 5 years since cancer took him. 5 years I'd spent rebuilding myself while hiding the truth from my family. They thought I was just a widow, living off Henry's modest insurance money and pension. If only they knew. "You're quiet back there, Martha," my daughter-in-law Melissa said, her voice syrupy sweet as she turned from the passenger seat. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, not a strand out of place, just like the calculated smile that never quite reached her eyes. "Excited about your surprise?" I'd learned to read people during my 40 years in real estate. Right now, Melissa's tight grip on her designer purse and the quick glance she exchanged with my son screamed that something wasn't right. "Every birthday's a blessing at my age," I replied, keeping my voice deliberately frail, the helpless old lady they expected me to be. "Though I'm curious why we've driven past Giovanni's. I thought that was my birthday tradition." David cleared his throat, his knuckles whitening around the steering wheel. "Change of plans, Mom. Something better." We turned into an elegant driveway lined with manicured maple trees. My heart froze as I recognized the sign, Golden Sunset Retirement Community. Not just any retirement home, my retirement home, the crown jewel of Wilson Properties, the company I'd secretly built after Henry died. "What's this?" I asked, injecting confusion into my voice while my mind raced. Did they know? No, impossible. I'd used shell companies, trusted lawyers. My ownership of this place and 12 other properties across New England was my best-kept secret. "Mom," David said as he parked, turning to face me with practiced sympathy. "We've been worried about you. The forgetfulness, the confusion. It's not safe for you to live alone anymore." "What forgetfulness?" I demanded, genuine anger flaring. "I haven't forgotten anything." Melissa reached back to pat my hand. "Last week you called David Henry, Martha, and remember when you couldn't find your medication? The one you take every single day? Lies. All lies. I'd never called David by his father's name, and my misplaced medication had mysteriously reappeared in the guest bathroom after Melissa had visited. "This is ridiculous," I protested as David came around to open my door. "Today's my birthday. Take me home." "This is your new home, Mom," David said firmly. "We've already moved some of your things. The staff is expecting you." As they led me through the elegant lobby, I noticed everything with owner's eyes. The fresh flowers I'd insisted on, the comfortable seating areas, the subtle security measures I'd implemented. My creation, my investment, and now, apparently, my prison. "Mrs. Henderson will take good care of you," David said, as a kind-faced woman in a Navy uniform approached. "She's the administrator." I bit back a laugh. Rebecca Henderson reported directly to me via email and secure calls twice monthly. She'd never met me in person, part of my privacy protocol, but she knew my voice. "Welcome to Golden Sunset," Rebecca said professionally, though I caught the flicker of confusion in her eyes at my family's behavior. "We're delighted to have you join our community." David handed over a folder. "Here's all of Mom's information. The doctor's evaluation confirming early-stage dementia is on top." My blood ran cold. "What doctor?" I'd never been diagnosed with anything. "I need to speak with my lawyer," I said firmly. Melissa's smile tightened. "Martha, remember, you made David your power of attorney last year, for your protection." Another lie. I would never. "We've got to run, Mom," David said, checking his watch, the Rolex I'd given him last Christmas. "We'll visit soon." They both hugged me, a performance for Rebecca's benefit. As they turned to leave, I heard Melissa whisper, "How long before we can put the house on the market?" "The lawyer said we can start the paperwork Monday," David replied, too quietly for anyone but me to hear. "She'll be much happier here anyway." The doors closed behind them, and I stood frozen in the lobby of my own building, abandoned on my birthday by the son I'd raised and the woman he married. Rebecca approached cautiously. "Mrs. Wilson, would you like to sit down? You look pale." I straightened my spine, years of negotiating multi-million-dollar deals stealing my resolve. "Ms. Henderson," I said quietly, "I believe we need to have a private conversation in your office. Immediately." Her eyes widened at my transformed voice, no longer the fragile old woman, but the sharp businesswoman I truly was. You have no idea who I really am, I said, steel in my words. But my son is about to learn that you should never underestimate your mother, especially one who owns the building you just left her in. Rebecca Henderson stared at me with wide eyes as we sat in her office. My office, technically. The door closed behind us with a soft click that felt like the turning of a lock on my son's fate. Mrs. Wilson, I don't understand. Please call me Martha, I said, removing my reading glasses from my purse. And I believe this will clear things up. I pulled out my phone, the one David didn't know about, and opened a secure email app protected by both fingerprint and facial recognition. Technology had always fascinated me, much to my family's amusement. Oh, Mom's trying to use a smartphone again, they'd laugh. If only they knew I'd invested in 3 tech startups last year alone. I turned the screen toward Rebecca, showing her the email chain between us from just last week, discussing property improvements and quarterly profits. Her name on one end and mine on the other, Martha Wilson, CEO, Wilson Properties, LLC. You're Madeline Ross? She whispered, using my business pseudonym. In the flesh, I replied. I've owned Golden Sunset and 12 other properties for nearly 5 years now. My late husband taught me well, but I built this empire myself. Rebecca sank back in her chair. But your son, the dementia diagnosis, fabricated, I said, anger flaring again. Part of what appears to be a carefully orchestrated plan to seize control of what they think is my modest estate, my house, my savings. They have no idea about any of this. I gestured around us at the elegant retirement community that generated over $2 million in annual profit. Why the secrecy, even from family? Rebecca asked. I looked out the window at the garden where residents were enjoying the summer sunshine. Henry always handled our finances. After he died, David immediately tried to help with my money. I saw how he and Melissa lived, always beyond their means, always wanting more. I decided to protect myself by keeping my new ventures private. Rebecca nodded slowly. What do you need from me? A smile spread across my face. First, we need to establish that I am absolutely staying here, but not as a patient with dementia, as an undercover owner conducting a quality review. Consider it done. Second, I need access to all security footage showing my arrival today. David's little speech about my condition will be evidence against the fraudulent papers he submitted. Rebecca was already taking notes. We keep footage for 90 days. I'll have IT secure it immediately. Perfect. And third, I continued, I need a trusted ally. Someone who understands what I'm facing and can help me build my case while I remain here. You have the entire staff at your disposal, Mrs. Wilson. Madeline. Martha. She stumbled over what to call me. Martha is fine, and I appreciate that, but I need someone specific, a resident named Catherine Parker. Rebecca raised an eyebrow. The former district attorney? She moved in about 6 months ago. I nodded. We've never met, but I've followed her career. A brilliant legal mind who specialized in elder fraud cases before her retirement. I want her as my roommate. Rebecca's professional composure cracked slightly. You want to share a room? But you own the premium private suites. David and Melissa will be suspicious if I'm given special treatment. I need to appear as just another resident while I gather evidence and plan my counterattack. Before Rebecca could respond, a knock at the door interrupted us. A young woman in scrubs peeked in. Sorry to interrupt, Ms. Henderson, but Mr. Wilson is calling. He wants to know if his mother has settled in and if she's still asking to leave. My jaw tightened. Not even 30 minutes, and he was already checking to make sure his plan was working. Tell him, I said before Rebecca could answer, that his mother is quite tired from the emotional day and is resting comfortably. She seems confused, but accepting of her new circumstances. After the nurse left, Rebecca looked at me with newfound respect. You're going to fight back. With everything I have, I confirmed. David and Melissa picked the wrong woman to underestimate. By the time I'm done, they'll wish they'd simply taken me to lunch at Giovanni's. I stood up, straightening my pearl necklace. Now, shall we tour my facility? I'd like to meet my new roommate and begin planning how to teach my son that some lessons come too late in life to forget. As we walked through the hallways, residents and staff greeted Rebecca warmly. I observed everything with new eyes, no longer just the owner concerned about property values and profit margins, but as someone whose life might depend on the quality of care here. You know, I said quietly as we approached the East Wing, when I bought this place, it was just business, another investment. I never imagined I'd end up living here myself. Rebecca matched my pace. And now? I paused, watching an elderly gentleman carefully tend to orchids in the solarium, his gnarled hands moving with surprising grace. Now I think perhaps it was fate. This place needs me as much as I need it right now, and together we're going to make sure justice is served. I smiled at an approaching resident, a sharp-eyed woman with silver hair pulled back in an elegant bun. Catherine Parker, if my research was correct, my new roommate, my new ally. "Wait," I said, touching Rebecca's arm. "Before we meet everyone, I'd like you to do something for me. If you truly believe in what I'm saying, anything. I need you to pause right now and tell anyone watching this that if they're enjoying my story, they should subscribe to this channel for the next chapters. There are more shocking revelations coming that they won't want to miss." I smiled with determination. "Now, let me introduce myself to the woman who's going to help me reclaim everything that's mine and teach my son the most expensive lesson of his life. Martha Wilson," I said, extending my hand to Catherine Parker. Her grip was firm, her gaze appraising. "I believe we're going to be roommates." "Former District Attorney Parker," she replied, a hint of amusement in her voice. "Though these days, everyone just calls me Catherine, or that nosy old lady who asks too many questions." I liked her immediately. Rebecca excused herself to handle the paperwork for our arrangement, leaving Catherine and me sitting in the sunlit common area. Around us, residents played cards, read books, or simply dozed in comfortable chairs. It all seemed so peaceful. A perfect facade hiding the betrayal that had brought me here. "So," Catherine said, stirring her tea, "Rebecca mentioned you requested me specifically as a roommate. Rather unusual for a new arrival who's supposedly suffering from dementia." My eyebrows shot up. "She told you?" "Not everything, just enough to pique my interest." Catherine leaned forward. 30 years prosecuting elder abuse cases teaches you to recognize when something doesn't add up. Your son deposits you here on your birthday with suspicious paperwork, and suddenly our administrator is treating you like you're the Queen of England. Her eyes twinkled. I'm intrigued. I glanced around, then lowered my voice. What I'm about to tell you must remain between us. For the next 10 minutes, I laid out the bare facts of my situation, my secret ownership of the facility, David's betrayal, the falsified medical documents. Catherine listened without interruption, her expression growing increasingly outraged. "The sheer audacity," she finally said, shaking her head. "Your own son." "Money changes people," I replied, the words bitter on my tongue. "Or perhaps it simply reveals who they truly are." Catherine studied me. "You don't seem particularly surprised by his behavior. Hurt, yes, but not shocked." Her perception was unsettling. I looked down at my hands, still steady despite everything. David was always ambitious. When Henry was alive, he kept David in check. After the funeral, things changed. David started visiting more often, asking about finances, suggesting I sell the house because it must hold so many painful memories. "And your daughter-in-law?" "Melissa." I couldn't keep the edge from my voice. "She married David for his potential, not for who he was. I saw it from the beginning, the way she pushed him to demand more from his father's company, to stretch beyond our means. Henry gave them the down payment for their house as a wedding gift. 6 months later, they were asking for money to renovate. A flash of memory hit me. David, as a little boy, sitting on Henry's lap as they built model airplanes together. His infectious laugh when Henry would pretend the planes were swooping down to tickle him. When had that sweet child become this man who could abandon his mother on her birthday? "Martha?" Catherine's voice pulled me back. "I'm sorry," I said, blinking away the unexpected moisture in my eyes. "It's been a day." "Indeed it has, and now you need a plan." Catherine's prosecutorial instinct was evident in her direct approach. "What evidence do we have of the fraud? The security footage from today? The falsified medical records? I've never even seen this doctor who supposedly diagnosed me. And I have documentation proving David does not have power of attorney." Catherine nodded. "Good start, but we need more. Communications between David and Melissa discussing their plans would be ideal, and we need to establish your mental competency beyond any doubt." "I've already contacted my attorney," I said. "He'll be arranging for an independent evaluation." "Smart move." Catherine looked impressed. "Most people in your situation would be too distraught to think so clearly." I smiled grimly. I didn't build a real estate empire by falling apart in a crisis. Our conversation was interrupted by a staff member announcing afternoon activities. As residents began moving toward the recreation room, Catherine stood. "Come on, Rumi, let's get you settled in. We can continue our strategy session in private." The room we shared was modest but pleasant. 2 twin beds with floral comforters, nightstands, a shared dresser, and a small sitting area near the window overlooking the garden. My suitcase, packed by David and Melissa, sat at the foot of one bed. As I unpacked, I discovered they'd included mostly nightgowns, slippers, and casual clothes. No business attire, nothing that would present me as a competent, independent woman. The message was clear. They were already seeing me as the diminished, dependent mother they wanted me to be. "They even took my jewelry," I muttered, finding only my everyday pieces. The valuable items, my diamond tennis bracelet, Henry's mother's emerald ring, were conspicuously absent. "Document everything," Catherine advised, handing me a notepad from her desk. "Every missing item, every conversation. Build your case methodically." As I wrote, Catherine settled into her chair by the window. "You know, in all my years prosecuting these cases, I've seen countless children try to take advantage of their parents. But rarely have I seen someone as prepared to fight back as you are." I paused my writing. "I'm not just fighting for myself. This is about principle. No one should be able to discard a parent like yesterday's trash just because they've reached a certain age." "Amen to that," Catherine agreed. "Now tell me more about this son of yours. What makes him tick? What are his vulnerabilities?" I spent the next hour detailing David's character, his insecurities, his desperate need for status, his genuine intelligence undermined by impatience and entitlement. "He wasn't always like this," I finished quietly. "There was a time when he was kind, thoughtful. I keep wondering where I went wrong." Catherine reached across and patted my hand. "We all wonder that about our children sometimes, but their choices are their own, Martha. Your job now is to protect yourself." As evening approached, a nurse came to check on us, reminding me that I had a phone call scheduled with David at 7:30 p.m. "He wants to see how you're settling in," she explained. After she left, Catherine and I exchanged glances. "Remember," Catherine said, "you're playing a role now. Confused, but compliant. Can you do that?" I nodded, steel returning to my spine. "I've negotiated with sharks in boardrooms across New England. I can certainly handle a phone call with my son." "Good. Because every conversation is an opportunity to gather intelligence." As I prepared for the call, I looked out at the fading daylight and thought about all the people watching my story unfold. "You know," I said to Catherine, "I'd love to know where all of you are watching from and how old you are. If you're enjoying this journey so far, please leave a comment below with your age and location and hit that like button. Your support means everything as I fight to reclaim my dignity." Catherine raised an eyebrow at my unexpected address, but I just smiled. Sometimes, when you're planning a strategic victory, you need all the allies you can get. The phone felt cold against my ear as I listened to David's voice, so concerned, so caring, a performance worthy of Broadway. "How are you feeling, Mom? Getting settled in okay?" he asked. The perfect picture of a dutiful son. I bit back the words I wanted to say, and instead played my role. I suppose so, David. It's all a bit confusing. This morning I was in my home, and now I let my voice trail off, adding a slight tremble for effect. Catherine gave me an approving nod from across the room, where she pretended to read while eavesdropping shamelessly. "I know it's an adjustment, Mom, but it's for the best. The doctor was very clear about your condition," David continued smoothly. "Melissa and I are just getting your house ready for the market. Property values in your neighborhood are at an all-time high." My blood boiled. Not even 24 hours, and they were already preparing to sell my home, the beautiful colonial that Henry and I had lovingly restored over decades, where David had grown up. "My house?" I injected confusion into my voice. "But where will I live when I come home?" An uncomfortable pause. "Mom, Golden Sunset is your home now. Remember? We talked about this. It's the best place for someone with your challenges." "But my things, my memories," I pressed, wanting to see how far he'd go. "We're keeping all the important stuff," he assured me quickly. "Family photos, keepsakes. The rest? Well, you know how you always said you wanted to downsize eventually." I closed my eyes, imagining the vultures picking through my belongings, deciding what was important enough to save. Melissa had always coveted my antique silver tea service. No doubt it would find its way to her dining room before the week was out. "David," I said, dropping my voice to a near whisper, "where's my jewelry box? The one with Grandma Wilson's emerald ring. I can't find it. Another pause, longer this time. It's safe, Mom. We're keeping all your valuables in our safe deposit box. You wouldn't want to lose something precious at the facility, right? Theft, pure and simple. I looked at Catherine, who was scribbling furiously in her notepad. I suppose that makes sense? I conceded, playing along. Will you bring it when you visit? I'd like to see it. Sure, Mom, he said quickly. Too quickly. Hey, listen, I've got to run. Melissa and I are meeting with the real estate agent for dinner. You get some rest, okay? We'll visit this weekend. After saying goodbye, I placed the phone down with deliberate care, though what I really wanted was to hurl it across the room. Well, Catherine said, setting aside her notepad, if we needed proof of intent, that conversation provided plenty. I moved to the window, watching as the last light of day faded from the gardens below. He's already selling my house, taking my jewelry. He didn't even ask if I needed anything. That call was recorded through the facility's system, Catherine reminded me. Another piece of evidence. It's not enough, I said, turning back to face her. I need to see what they're doing at the house, what they're taking. Catherine raised an eyebrow. You have someone who can help with that? A smile tugged at my lips. As a matter of fact, I do. The next morning, after a surprisingly decent breakfast in the dining hall, I excused myself to make a private call from the facility's phone booth, a quaint feature I'd insisted on when renovating the place, knowing many residents preferred traditional handsets to cell phones. Santiago Security, answered a crisp, professional voice. This is Martha Wilson, I said, lowering my voice. I need to speak with Miguel immediately. Within moments, Miguel Santiago was on the line, my head of security for all properties in the Wilson portfolio, and a man who owed his business success partly to my early investment. Mrs. Wilson, he said warmly, what can I do for you? Quickly, I explained my situation. Miguel's reaction moved from shock to outrage to determined resolve. So you need surveillance on your home? Consider it done. I'll have my best people there within the hour. We'll document everything they remove and access the security system you already have installed. The security system that David had no idea about. Cameras I'd had discreetly installed after noticing small items going missing during Melissa's visits. Thank you, Miguel. And one more thing. I need a secure phone. Can you have one delivered here? Something that can't be traced back to you or me? I'll have Maria bring it personally. She can pose as your niece visiting. After finishing the call, I returned to find Catherine chatting with a distinguished-looking gentleman in the common area. She waved me over. Martha, meet Judge Walter Simmons. Walter, this is my new roommate, Martha Wilson. The elderly man stood, revealing an impressive height despite a slight stoop. He took my hand with old-world courtesy. A pleasure, Mrs. Wilson. Catherine was just telling me you're new to our little community. Involuntarily new, Catherine added with meaningful emphasis. Understanding flickered in the judge's eyes. Ah, one of those situations. Walter was on the bench for 40 years, Catherine explained. Family court, among other assignments. He's seen his share of inheritance anticipation cases. That's a delicate way of putting it, he said with a wry smile. I presided over hundreds of guardianship hearings, saw plenty of adult children suddenly discovering their parents were incompetent right after inheriting money or property. And now you're here, I observed. A shadow crossed his face. My daughter thought it best after my wife passed. She lives in California, busy career. This was convenient for her. His tone suggested there was more to the story, but he quickly brightened. However, I've found unexpected purpose here. Informal legal advice for residents facing challenges with their families or finances. Judge Simmons, Walter, might be another valuable ally, Catherine suggested. By mid-afternoon, I'd been introduced to several more residents with relevant backgrounds. A retired banker, a former social worker specializing in elder care, and a woman who'd spent 30 years as a private investigator. Golden Sunset, it seemed, was filled with sharp minds and sharper instincts. Your own personal senior citizen, Ocean's 11, Catherine joked as we walked the grounds later, all with axes to grind against family members who underestimated them. I laughed, my first genuine laugh since arriving. I never expected to find such resources here. That's the thing about places like this, Catherine said, gesturing around us. Society puts us out to pasture, assuming we're finished contributing. They forget that wisdom and experience don't diminish with age. As promised, Miguel's employee Maria arrived that afternoon, playing the part of my concerned niece perfectly. Between hugs, she slipped me a smartphone in a discreet case that looked like an old-fashioned address book. That evening, I received my first report from Miguel. David and Melissa had spent hours at my house with a real estate agent. They'd already begun boxing up smaller items, and Melissa had been photographed wearing my diamond tennis bracelet as she directed movers toward my antique secretary desk, a family heirloom worth thousands. I showed the photos to Catherine, my hands shaking with rage. "Document everything," she reminded me. "Remember, we're playing the long game here." I nodded, taking a deep breath. "You're right. They think they have all the time in the world to dismantle my life. That's their weakness, overconfidence." As I prepared for bed that first night away from home, I found myself addressing imaginary observers again. If you're following my story, I'd love to know where you're watching from and how old you are. Please comment below and like this video if you're supporting me through this journey. Catherine gave me an odd look. "You know, you've done that twice now. Spoken to invisible people. Should I be concerned about your mental state after all?" I laughed and shook my head. "Just a quirk I've developed in my old age. Sometimes I imagine my life as a story being told to others who might learn from it." "Well," Catherine said, climbing into her bed, "if people are watching, I hope they're taking notes, because what we're about to do will be a master class in justice served cold." I smiled at her words, feeling for the first time since my birthday that perhaps this betrayal might become something more. A lesson not just for David, but for anyone who thought age equaled vulnerability. The game was just beginning. A week passed at Golden Sunset, each day a careful balance of playing the confused elderly mother while secretly building my case. David visited twice, brief, perfunctory appearances where he patted my hand, spoke to me in that loud, slow voice people reserve for those they consider mentally diminished, and deflected all my questions about the house. "Don't worry about any of that, Mom," he'd say, checking his watch every few minutes. "Melissa and I have everything under control." "I'm sure you do," I thought, nodding docilely while my mind cataloged every condescending word for future reference. On his second visit, he brought Jenny, my 18-year-old granddaughter. Unlike her parents, Jenny's distress seemed genuine as she hugged me tightly. "Grandma, I don't understand why you're here," she whispered when David stepped out to take a call. "You seemed fine at Easter." I squeezed her hand, wondering how much to reveal. Jenny had always been different from her parents, more compassionate, less materialistic. While David and Melissa pushed her toward business school and corporate internships, Jenny volunteered at animal shelters and talked about studying environmental science. "Things aren't always what they seem, sweetheart," I said carefully. "How are things at home?" Jenny glanced toward the door. "Weird. Mom's been wearing your jewelry, said you wanted her to have it, and they've been moving furniture out of your house. Dad said it's being staged for sale, but..." She hesitated. "But what?" I prompted. "I heard them arguing last night. Mom wants to use some of the money from your house for a vacation home in Florida. Dad thinks they should invest it. They're already spending it, Grandma, like I'm already gone," I finished for her. Tears welled in her eyes. I told them it wasn't right. "Dad said I don't understand adult responsibilities, and Mom said you're being taken care of better here anyway." She looked around the common room with its institutional furniture and bland artwork. "But this isn't your home." I took a risk. "Jenny, if I needed your help with something important, something secret, could I trust you?" Her eyes widened, curiosity replacing sadness. "Of course, Grandma. Anything. When you visit next time, bring my old photo album, the blue one from the shelf in my study. Tell your father you want it for a school project about family history." "The blue album," she repeated. "But why?" "Jenny!" David's voice cut through our conversation as he returned, phone in hand. "We need to go. Your mother needs us at the house. The realtor is coming for final measurements." Jenny squeezed my hand one last time before standing. "I'll bring it next time, Grandma. I promise." After they left, I found Catherine waiting in our room, eager for an update. "I think I have another ally," I told her with cautious optimism. "My granddaughter Jenny seems troubled by what her parents are doing." "Be careful," Catherine warned. "Family loyalties are complicated. Children often side with their parents, even when they have doubts." "Jenny's different," I insisted. "She has Henry's moral compass." "What's in the blue album?" Catherine asked, always quick to catch important details. I smiled. "Nothing sentimental. It's where I kept hard copies of my most important documents, including the real power of attorney I granted to my attorney, Thomas Blackwell, not to David, and photos of the jewelry collection with insurance documentation showing value. If they've sold any pieces, that's grand theft. Catherine looked impressed. You really did prepare for this possibility. Not specifically this, I admitted, but after 40 years in real estate, I learned to keep ironclad documentation of everything valuable. I sighed, suddenly feeling the weight of the deception surrounding me. I just never imagined I'd need to use it against my own son. That evening, I joined a bridge game with Catherine, Judge Simmons, and Harriet Goldstein, the retired private investigator. As we played, I noticed how their conversation subtly extracted information from me, my background, my family situation, my mental acuity, while sharing relevant experiences from their own lives. It's not uncommon, you know, Harriet said as she dealt the cards. I worked a case once where 3 siblings conspired to have their mother declared incompetent. She'd won the lottery, $4 million. What happened? I asked. A wolfish grin spread across Harriet's face. Let's just say that by the time I finished my investigation, those kids were lucky their mother didn't press charges. She used some of her winnings to move to Boca Raton, sends them Christmas cards from her beachfront condo every year. Judge Simmons chuckled. The courts are finally starting to take elder fraud seriously. 20 years ago, cases like yours were dismissed as family matters. Now prosecutors have specialized units. Speaking of which, Catherine interjected, I made a call to an old colleague in the DA's office. Strictly hypothetical, of course. The fraudulent medical diagnosis alone could mean serious consequences for David. I laid down my cards. I don't want my son to go to jail, I said quietly. I want justice, not vengeance. Judge Simmons studied me with kind eyes. Martha, in my experience, people who commit these kinds of acts rarely stop at one victim. If your son faces no consequences, what's to prevent him from doing the same to someone else's mother? Someone without your resources or preparation? His words struck home. This wasn't just about me anymore. Later that night, my secure phone buzzed with a message from Miguel. He'd sent photos from my home security system. David and Melissa in my study, rifling through my desk drawers. Melissa trying on my pearl necklace, the one Henry had given me on our 30th anniversary, preening before the mirror while David searched through file cabinets. I zoomed in on one image, David holding what appeared to be my financial documents, his expression triumphant. The next photo showed his face transforming to confusion, then alarm, as he apparently realized the statements showed only modest savings and investments, nothing like the wealth he was expecting. They can't find evidence of my real assets, I told Catherine, showing her the photos. Everything significant is under my business entities. He looks worried, Catherine observed. Financial pressure? Possibly. David's always lived beyond his means. I know they remortgaged their house last year to pay for renovations. A plan began forming in my mind, a way to apply pressure that might reveal even more of their intentions. The next morning, I asked Rebecca to arrange a meeting with the facility's visiting financial advisor under the guise of reviewing my limited personal accounts. Instead, I used the meeting to make a call to the real estate agent handling my home, using my Martha Wilson voice, not my confused elderly lady persona. This is Martha Wilson. I understand you're working with my son to sell my property. The agent sounded startled. Mrs. Wilson, yes. David said you were indisposed. A temporary situation, I replied smoothly. I'm calling to inform you that the property is not for sale. My son does not have authority to list it. But he showed me power of attorney documents, fraudulent ones, I interrupted. My attorney will be contacting you formally, but I wanted to give you professional courtesy of advance notice. Anyone involved in this fraudulent sale could face legal consequences. After ending the call, I sent a text to Miguel. Phase 1 initiated. By that afternoon, the storm began. My secure phone rang. David, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. Mom, the real estate agent just called me. She said you told her the house isn't for sale. What's going on? I pitched my voice high, confused. David, is that you? Where are you calling from? This isn't the facility phone. A pause. What? No, Mom. This is your home number. Did someone give you a cell phone? A cell phone? I don't understand all that technology, you know that, I said, laying it on thick. A nice lady let me use her phone to call about my house. I was confused why strangers were coming through it. Mom, his voice strained with forced patience. We talked about this. You're living at Golden Sunset now. The house is too much for you to maintain. But it's my house, I said, a quaver in my voice. Henry and I bought it. I don't want to sell it. It's for the best, Mom. Listen, I've got to go. We'll talk about this when I visit tomorrow. After he hung up, I turned to Catherine, who had been listening on speakerphone. He's coming tomorrow, earlier than planned. Good, she said with a satisfied nod. He's rattled. People make mistakes when they're rattled. The next day, David arrived alone, his normally impeccable appearance slightly disheveled. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and he kept checking his phone nervously. Mom, he began without preamble, we need to talk about the house. I blinked innocently. Which house, dear? He ran a hand through his hair. Your house, Mom. Our family home. You called the real estate agent yesterday. Did I? I tilted my head. I'm sorry. I get confused sometimes. That's why I'm here, right? Because I get confused? David squirmed visibly. Yes, but look, the house sale is important. We need to use that money for your care here. But I thought Medicare and my pension covered that, I said, deliberately bringing up financial matters I'd previously seemed too confused to discuss. Well, yes, partially, but he stopped, frowning. Who have you been talking to about this? I widened my eyes. The nice people here. We play cards and talk. Is that wrong? David leaned closer, lowering his voice. Mom, you need to stop interfering with the house sale. You're not thinking clearly. Remember what the doctor said? Which doctor? I asked. I'd like to speak with this doctor. What was his name again? For a moment, panic flashed across David's face before he composed himself. Dr. Richter. We've discussed this, Mom, several times. I don't remember any Dr. Richter, I insisted. Could you arrange for him to visit me here? I have questions about my condition. He's very busy, David said quickly, but I'll see what I can do. By the time he left, David was visibly agitated, making a phone call the moment he stepped into the hallway. Through the partially open door, I heard snippets. She's asking questions. No, I don't think she suspects anything. We need to move faster. Catherine, who had been pretending to nap during our conversation, opened one eye. You certainly know how to push his buttons. I learned from the best, I replied, thinking of Henry and his negotiation tactics. Always let the other party reveal their weaknesses. That evening, as we finished dinner in the dining hall, Miguel sent another update. David and Melissa had been arguing heatedly in their car outside my house. Later, Melissa had called a local jewelry appraiser about inherited pieces she wanted to sell. They're getting desperate, Catherine observed. Selling your jewelry, pushing to close the house sale quickly. They must need the money urgently. And now they're worried I might be a problem, I added, which means they might take more drastic measures. Like what? I thought for a moment. They could try to have me transferred to a facility with less autonomy, or increase the medication they claim I need. Catherine nodded gravely. We need to accelerate our timeline. The longer this goes on, the more risk to you. You're right, I agreed. It's time for our next move. I turned as if addressing an audience. For those of you who have been following my journey and supporting me, I want to thank you. Please make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss what happens next. If you've ever dealt with family betrayal, share this with someone who needs to hear it. You know, Catherine remarked, for someone supposedly suffering from dementia, you have an unusual habit of addressing imaginary audiences. I smiled enigmatically. Perhaps I just like to believe that our stories matter beyond the moment we live them. Poetic, she conceded. Now, let's go plan how to trap your son in his own deception. The blue photo album felt heavy in my hands when Jenny delivered it 3 days later. She'd come alone, using her weekend job at the local coffee shop as an excuse to visit without her parents. They didn't even question it, she told me as we sat in a quiet corner of the garden. Dad's been distracted, arguing with Mom about money. And yesterday some man called about jewelry Melissa was trying to sell, something about provenance and insurance documentation. I hid my smile. Miguel's associate at the jewelry appraisal shop had done exactly as instructed. Jenny, I said, keeping my voice low, what I'm about to tell you might be difficult to hear, but I need you to know the truth. Over the next half hour, I explained everything, not the confused grandmother David portrayed me as, but the sharp businesswoman who had built an empire in secret. I showed her documentation from the album proving my ownership of Golden Sunset and other properties. I told her about the falsified medical diagnosis, the fraudulent power of attorney, the theft of my jewelry. Jenny's expression shifted from shock to disbelief to anger. "They lied to me," she whispered. "They said you needed specialized care, that you couldn't recognize family members sometimes." Her eyes filled with tears. Dad looked me in the eye and said it was what you wanted. I squeezed her hand. "People can justify almost anything when money is involved. What are you going to do?" she asked. "Expose the truth," I replied. "But I need to be careful. If they realize I'm building a case, they might take more drastic measures." Jenny straightened her shoulders, so like Henry when he'd made an important decision. "I want to help." I studied my granddaughter's face, weighing the risks against the benefits of involving her. "It could put you in a difficult position with your parents. They put themselves in a difficult position when they lied to me," she said firmly. "Besides, Grandpa always said doing the right thing isn't supposed to be easy." Pride swelled in my chest. "Your grandfather would be so proud of you right now." We spent the next hour going through my plan. Jenny would be my eyes and ears in the house, documenting what items were being removed and eavesdropping on conversations about finances. She'd also search for the fraudulent medical records and power of attorney documents David had used. "I know where Dad keeps important papers," she assured me. "He thinks his home office safe is secure, but I figured out the combination years ago. Christmas and his birthday, not exactly creative." As she prepared to leave, Jenny hugged me tightly. "I'm sorry, Grandma. I should have questioned things earlier." "You're questioning them now," I said. "That's what matters." After Jenny left, I joined Catherine, Judge Simmons, and Harriet in Catherine's carefully orchestrated therapy group, our cover for strategy meetings. Today, we were joined by Dr. Eleanor Patel, the facility's medical director, whom Rebecca had cautiously brought into our confidence after thorough vetting. "I've reviewed the supposed medical documentation," Dr. Patel said, her expression grim. "It's concerning on multiple levels. The neurological assessment allegedly performed by this Dr. Richter doesn't follow standard protocols, and some of the symptoms described are inconsistent with any form of dementia I've encountered in 30 years of practice." "Can you perform your own assessment?" Catherine asked. "Something official we can use to counter these fraudulent claims?" Dr. Patel nodded. "I've already scheduled Mrs. Wilson for a complete cognitive evaluation with an independent neurologist who specializes in geriatric care. He's a respected expert witness in competency cases." "Perfect," Judge Simmons said. "Medical evidence will be crucial when we move to invalidate the fraudulent power of attorney." Harriet, who had been quietly taking notes, looked up. "My contact at the bank confirmed that David attempted to access Martha's safe deposit box yesterday. He presented the power of attorney, but the manager remembered Martha's explicit instructions that no one but her was permitted access, regardless of documentation. They turned him away." I nodded, grateful for the precautions I'd put in place years ago. "He's getting desperate. The house sale is stalled, he can't access my accounts or safe deposit box, and the jewelry he thought would bring quick cash is proving difficult to sell without proper documentation." "Which brings us to the next phase," Catherine said, spreading out a calendar. "Thanksgiving is 2 weeks away. Martha believes that would be the ideal time to spring our trap." "A family holiday," Judge Simmons mused. "Symbolic. More than symbolic," I explained. "David and Melissa always host Thanksgiving. Family, friends, business associates. It's their annual showcase of success. This year, David told me they're having 30 guests, including his boss and several potential clients." "The perfect audience," Harriet said with a knowing smile. "Exactly," I confirmed. "David values his reputation above almost everything. Being exposed as someone who abandoned his mother and falsified medical documents to seize her assets in front of his professional network would devastate him." "But how do we get you there?" Dr. Patel asked. "You're supposedly too cognitively impaired to leave the facility." I smiled. "That's where you come in, doctor. I'll need your help arranging a therapeutic day pass for family Thanksgiving. Something about familiar surroundings potentially benefiting patients with memory issues." "Plausible," Dr. Patel agreed. "I can document it as part of your treatment plan." "And I'll drive her," Catherine volunteered, as her support person from the facility. We spent the next hour refining the details. By the time our therapy session ended, we had a comprehensive plan in place. That evening, as expected, David called. His voice sounded tense, controlled. "Mom, how are you doing today?" I gave my now practiced confused response, asking about his day and then appearing to forget his answer moments later. Then I introduced the idea Rebecca had coached me on. "David, dear, when is Thanksgiving? The nice doctor here said something about me visiting family." There was a pause. Thanksgiving? That's in 2 weeks, Mom. Oh, will I be home by then? I injected innocent hope into my voice. Another pause, longer this time. Mom, Golden Sunset is your home now, remember? We've talked about this. But holidays are for family, I persisted. The doctor, the nice lady doctor here, said I could visit for Thanksgiving. She called it a therapeutic pass for familiar surroundings. Did she? David's tone sharpened. I should speak with her about that. I'm not sure it's a good idea, Mom. Our house will be full of guests. It might be overwhelming for you. Oh, I said, allowing my voice to quaver with disappointment. I understand. I'll just stay here alone on Thanksgiving then. The emotional manipulation was deliberate and effective. No, Mom, that's not. He sighed heavily. Let me talk to Melissa and call you back. After hanging up, I exchanged a satisfied nod with Catherine. He'll agree, I predicted. He won't risk looking like the son who abandoned his mother on Thanksgiving. Sure enough, David called back an hour later, his voice artificially bright. Good news, Mom. We figured it out. You can come for Thanksgiving dinner. The facility can arrange transportation, right? I think my friend Catherine might drive me, I said. She's alone for Thanksgiving too. Catherine? My roommate. She's very nice. Used to be a lawyer? No, that's not right. Anyway, she's helping me remember things. David's voice grew cautious. Mom, are you making friends with the other residents? They're very smart here, I said cheerfully. We play cards and talk about our children. Another pause. What? What do you talk about? Oh, you know, the usual. How often they visit, how they handle our finances. I deliberately let that hang in the air. Mom, you know I'm doing everything I can to take care of your finances properly, David said stiffly. That's why we're selling the house, to ensure you have the best care. Of course, dear, I said soothingly. I'm sure you know best. Oh, Catherine is calling me for bingo. I need to go. I hung up before he could respond, then turned to Catherine with a grim smile. He's worried now, wondering what I might have told others, what I might remember and say during Thanksgiving dinner. Good, Catherine said. An anxious opponent makes mistakes. Over the next week, Jenny provided regular updates. David had been making frantic calls to the real estate agent, pushing to close the house sale before Thanksgiving. He'd also contacted several lawyers, presumably seeking advice about challenging the bank's refusal to grant him access to my safe deposit box. Most disturbing was what Jenny overheard one night, David and Melissa discussing the possibility of having me transferred to a different facility, one with a more structured environment and appropriate medication protocols. They're talking about sedating you, Grandma, Jenny said during her next visit, her voice shaking with anger, making sure you're too drugged to question anything. My blood ran cold, but I kept my expression calm for Jenny's sake. That won't happen, I assured her. Our plan is almost ready. On my secure phone that evening, I messaged my attorney, Thomas Blackwell. Accelerate timeline. Potential transfer risk. Thomas responded immediately. All documents prepared. Court date set for Monday after Thanksgiving. Judge Caruthers presiding. I showed Catherine the exchange. We need to survive Thanksgiving dinner. Then the legal process begins. Are you nervous? She asked. I considered the question carefully. Not about exposing David. That needs to happen. I'm nervous about facing the reality that my son, my only child, was willing to discard me for money. Catherine squeezed my hand. Family can hurt us like no one else. But family isn't always about blood. Sometimes it's about who stands by you when it matters. I thought about Catherine, Judge Simmons, Harriet, Dr. Patel, Rebecca, Miguel, and Jenny, my unexpected alliance of supporters. Perhaps Catherine was right. Family took many forms. The day before Thanksgiving, Dr. Patel brought me the results of my neurological evaluation. Perfect scores across all cognitive assessments, she reported with satisfaction. The neurologist's report explicitly states there is no evidence of dementia or cognitive impairment of any kind. In fact, he noted your exceptional mental acuity for any age. I accepted the official report with a smile. One more piece of our puzzle. That night, I found myself addressing my invisible audience again. If you've been following my journey, please make sure you're subscribed and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Tomorrow is Thanksgiving, and I'll finally confront the son who abandoned me in my own building. Your support means everything as I prepare for the most difficult conversation of my life. Catherine, packing a small overnight bag for our Thanksgiving adventure, shook her head fondly. There you go again, talking to your imaginary viewers. Maybe we should have checked you for other conditions besides dementia. I laughed, the sound dispelling some of my tension. Maybe I'm just rehearsing for tomorrow's performance. One last time playing the confused mother before the grand revelation. Are you ready? Catherine asked, suddenly serious. I thought about David, the little boy who once made me Mother's Day cards with glitter that got everywhere, the teenager who drove me crazy with his loud music, the young man who had made me so proud at his college graduation. Somewhere along the way, I'd lost that son to greed and entitlement. Yes, I said firmly, I'm ready to reclaim my life and my dignity, and perhaps, in the long run, help my son reclaim his conscience. As I laid out my outfit for tomorrow, an elegant blue dress I'd had Jenny smuggle from my closet, not the shapeless cardigans David and Melissa had packed for me, I felt a strange sense of calm. Tomorrow would change everything, for better or worse. The trap was set, and this time, the vulnerable old lady would be the one springing it. Thanksgiving Day dawned crisp and clear, sunlight streaming through autumn leaves as Catherine drove us toward David's suburban home. I sat in the passenger seat, dressed in my blue silk dress and pearl necklace, not the real ones Melissa had taken, but a convincing replica Miguel had provided. Nervous? Catherine asked, glancing at me as we turned onto Maple Street, where large colonial homes sat behind manicured lawns. Strangely calm, I replied, smoothing my silver hair, which I'd styled carefully instead of leaving it in the messy bun David was now accustomed to seeing. I feel like I've been preparing for this moment my entire life. In my purse rested a slim portfolio containing everything I needed: the neurologist's report, documentation of my ownership of Golden Sunset and other properties, evidence of the falsified power of attorney, and photographs of Melissa wearing my jewelry. Thomas Blackwell would arrive separately, timed to coincide with dinner. As we pulled into David's circular driveway, I noted the luxury cars already parked there: Mercedes, BMWs, a Lexus, belonging to the colleagues and clients David was so eager to impress. The house itself, a 4-bedroom colonial David and Melissa had stretched their finances to afford, was decorated with tasteful Thanksgiving wreaths and potted chrysanthemums. Remember, Catherine said as she turned off the engine, stick to the plan. Play confused until everyone's present. I nodded, then reached over to squeeze her hand. Thank you for everything. Just doing my job as your roommate, she replied with a wink. Besides, I haven't had this much fun since I prosecuted that embezzling city councilman in '98. David opened the front door before we could ring the bell, his smile tight and his eyes darting nervously between me and Catherine. Mom! Happy Thanksgiving! He hugged me stiffly, then extended his hand to Catherine. And you must be. Catherine, was it? Mom's mentioned you. Catherine Parker, she replied, shaking his hand firmly. Your mother has told me so much about you, David. Something in her tone made him pause, a flicker of unease crossing his face before he recovered. All good things, I hope. Please come in. Everyone's in the living room having appetizers. The house was warm, filled with the aroma of roasting turkey and the murmur of conversation. As we entered the spacious living room, heads turned to observe us. I recognized several of David's colleagues, some neighbors, and at the center of it all, Melissa, resplendent in a designer dress, directing a caterer where to place a tray of hors d'oeuvres. When she spotted me, her smile faltered momentarily before she rushed over. Martha, how wonderful you could join us. She air-kissed my cheek, then whispered, David, you didn't tell me she'd be so put together today. The facility must have helped her dress, he muttered back, not realizing how clearly I could hear him. Jenny appeared from the kitchen, her face lighting up when she saw me. She embraced me warmly, whispering, Everything's ready, Grandma, before turning to introduce herself to Catherine. For the next hour, I played my role perfectly, the slightly confused elderly mother, occasionally asking the same question twice or misidentifying a guest. David hovered anxiously, jumping in to explain away my confusion and steering conversations away from anything substantive. Mom's having one of her good days, he told his boss, a silver-haired man named Richard. But the doctors say that's common with her condition, moments of clarity mixed with confusion. How fortunate you found such a nice facility for her, Richard commented. We only want the best for her, Melissa chimed in, absently touching the diamond tennis bracelet on her wrist, my bracelet. I pretended not to notice, but Catherine's sharp eyes caught the gesture, and she gave me a subtle nod. As dinner approached, the doorbell rang. David frowned, checking his watch. Are we missing someone, Melissa? Not that I know of, she replied, equally puzzled. When David opened the door, Thomas Blackwell stood there, elegant in his tailored suit, despite being in his 70s. Good evening. I believe I'm expected. I'm sorry. There must be some mistake, David began. No mistake, I called out, my voice suddenly clear and strong, nothing like the fragile tone I'd been using. I invited him. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to me. David stared, confusion evident on his face. Mom, do you know this man? Of course I do, I said, walking forward with confidence. This is Thomas Blackwell, my attorney for the past 30 years. Melissa hurried to David's side. I'm sorry, but we're in the middle of Thanksgiving dinner. Perhaps you could come back another time? Thomas smiled politely. I'm afraid this matter can't wait. It concerns Mrs. Wilson's legal standing and assets, which we're managing as her power of attorney, David said quickly, placing a protective arm around my shoulders. Mom's not well, as you can see. I shrugged off his arm and stood straight, meeting his gaze directly. Actually, David, I'm perfectly well, as confirmed by the neurological evaluation I underwent last week. The mask of concerned son slipped, revealing a flash of alarm. What evaluation? The facility can't authorize medical tests without my consent. They can when the patient is fully competent and requests them, Catherine interjected, stepping forward. Allow me to introduce myself properly. Catherine Parker, former district attorney for Suffolk County, specializing in elder fraud cases. A murmur rippled through the gathering of guests, who were now watching with undisguised interest. I think we should discuss this privately, David said through clenched teeth, glancing anxiously at his colleagues. Why? I asked innocently. Aren't these your friends and business associates, the people you want to impress with your beautiful home and successful life? Don't they deserve to know the truth about how you finance it all? Melissa gripped David's arm. David, what is she talking about? The caterer appeared in the dining room doorway. Dinner is served, she announced, then retreated quickly, sensing the tension. Perfect timing, I said. Let's all sit down. I have quite a story to tell over turkey. Despite David's obvious discomfort, social convention prevailed. No one wanted to be the first to leave what had become the most interesting Thanksgiving dinner in memory. We moved to the dining room, where a long table gleamed with Melissa's best china and silverware, some of which I recognized as pieces taken from my home. I took the seat at the end of the table opposite David, with Catherine and Thomas flanking me. Jenny quietly slipped into the chair beside Catherine, while Melissa sat rigidly next to David, her knuckles white around her water glass. After a painfully awkward blessing, led by Richard at David's request, serving began. I waited until everyone had food on their plates before speaking. I want to thank everyone for being here today, I began, my voice clear and steady, especially since you're all witnesses to something important. David laughed nervously. Mom loves to be dramatic. It's part of her condition. My condition, I repeated, opening the portfolio I'd brought. Let's talk about that, shall we? Dr. Eleanor Patel, medical director at Golden Sunset Retirement Community, supervised a complete neurological evaluation performed by Dr. James Westfield, chief of neurology at Boston Memorial. I slid the report across the table. His conclusion: I show no signs of cognitive impairment, dementia, or any other condition affecting my mental capacity. David didn't touch the report. One doctor's opinion doesn't overrule Dr. Richter's diagnosis. Ah, the mysterious Dr. Richter, Thomas interjected smoothly. We've been trying to locate him. Strangely, there's no record of a neurologist by that name licensed in Massachusetts. The guests exchanged glances. Richard put down his fork, his attention fully captured. This is ridiculous, Melissa snapped. We're trying to enjoy Thanksgiving. So was I replied calmly. Until my son and daughter-in-law abandoned me at a retirement home on my birthday, using falsified medical documents to seize control of my assets. A collective gasp rippled around the table. David's face flushed. That's not what happened. Mom needed specialized care. We were worried about her safety. Is that why you immediately began selling my jewelry? I asked, sliding several photos across the table. Surveillance images from my home showing Melissa trying on my pieces, paired with photos of her wearing them in public. Or why you listed my house for sale the very next day? Those pieces were gifted to me, Melissa protested. Martha wanted me to have them. I turned to the guests. Would any of you gift away family heirlooms without documentation, if you were in your right mind? especially pieces insured for over $100,000? More uncomfortable shifting in chairs. David's boss was now watching him with open suspicion. But here's what I find most interesting, I continued, producing another document. David isn't even my power of attorney. This document, which he presented to Golden Sunset and my bank, is a forgery. Thomas placed the genuine power of attorney beside it. Mrs. Wilson granted power of attorney to me 5 years ago, after her husband's death. We renew it annually. The document David has been using contains discrepancies in both the notarization and my signature. David stood abruptly. This is all a misunderstanding. Mom's been confused, mixing things up. Like the fact that I own Golden Sunset Retirement Community, I interrupted quietly. The room went completely silent. David stared at me, his face draining of color. "What did you just say?" he whispered. "Golden Sunset Retirement Community is owned by Wilson Properties LLC, along with 12 other commercial and residential properties throughout New England." I smiled. "I've been quite busy since your father died, David, building the real estate empire he and I always dreamed of." Melissa's hand flew to her throat. "That's not possible. You're just a housewife." "A housewife who worked in real estate for 40 years before retiring," I corrected her. "A housewife who doubled as your father's business partner," I told David. "Henry may have been the face of our investments, but I was always the one who found the properties, analyzed their potential, structured the deals." "If that's true," David said, desperation creeping into his voice, "why keep it secret from us, your family?" "Because of exactly what happened when you thought I had something valuable," I replied sadly. "You tried to take it." Jenny stood up suddenly. "I can't listen to any more of this," she said, her voice shaking. "Dad, you and Mom lied to me. You said Grandma couldn't take care of herself anymore. You said she needed to be in that place." "Jenny, you don't understand," David began. "I understand perfectly," she cut him off. "I found the papers in your office safe, the ones from the lawyer about declaring Grandma incompetent so you could access her accounts. There was even a draft agreement to sell her house to your golf buddy for below market value for a quick cash sale." Several guests were now openly staring at David with disgust. Richard pushed his plate away, his appetite clearly gone. "I think," Catherine said into the uncomfortable silence, "this might be a good time to mention that Martha has already filed legal documents to invalidate the fraudulent power of attorney. The hearing is scheduled for Monday. And the police have been notified about the theft of Martha's jewelry," Thomas added, "though charges haven't been filed yet." "Charges?" Melissa's voice rose to a near shriek. "You'd press charges against your own son?" I looked at her steadily. "I'd rather not, which is why I'm offering an alternative." I nodded to Thomas, who produced another document. "This is a proposed settlement," I explained. "In exchange for returning all my property, including my jewelry, house keys, and financial documents, and signing a statement acknowledging the fraudulent nature of your actions, I'll agree not to pursue criminal charges." "You expect us to admit to fraud?" David asked incredulously. "I expect you to take responsibility," I replied. "The statement won't be made public unless you attempt something like this again, with me or anyone else. And if we refuse," David challenged, a hint of his old arrogance returning, "then on Monday I'll ask the court to pursue this matter to the fullest extent of the law," I said simply. "Elder fraud carries significant penalties in Massachusetts, including prison time." The room had grown so quiet you could hear the clock ticking in the hallway. Guests looked uncomfortable, caught in a family drama none of them had anticipated. "I don't want that, David," I continued, my voice softer now. "Despite everything, you're still my son. I'd rather see you learn from this than be punished for it." David sank back into his chair, defeat evident in every line of his body. Melissa stared straight ahead, tears streaming down her face, mascara leaving black tracks on her carefully made-up cheeks. Richard cleared his throat. "I think perhaps the rest of us should give the family some privacy to discuss these matters." He stood, prompting others to follow suit. "David, I'll see you in my office first thing Monday morning." The implied threat was unmistakable. As the guests filed out, murmuring awkward thanks and goodbyes, I remained seated, watching the life David and Melissa had so carefully constructed crumble around them. It brought me no joy, only a profound sadness that it had come to this. When the last guest had departed, Jenny came to stand beside me, her hand on my shoulder. Catherine and Thomas remained seated, silent guardians ensuring the confrontation remained civil. "What happens now?" Jenny asked quietly. I looked at my son and daughter-in-law, these strangers who shared my blood and name. That, I said, is entirely up to them. I reached out to those watching my story unfold, my voice steady despite the emotion of the moment. For those who have followed my journey to this point, thank you for your support. Make sure you're subscribed and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Sometimes standing up for yourself means facing painful truths about those closest to you. As David and Melissa exchanged defeated glances, I knew the final chapter of this saga was still to be written. But for the first time since my birthday, I felt truly in control of my destiny again. The confused, helpless mother was gone. In her place sat the woman I had always been, strong, capable, and unwilling to be anyone's victim. The days following Thanksgiving unfolded like a carefully choreographed dance. David and Melissa, faced with the prospect of legal consequences and social ruin, signed the settlement agreement in Thomas's office the very next morning. Their signatures trembled on the paper, their faces ashen as the full reality of their situation sank in. "All your jewelry will be returned by this afternoon," David said stiffly, unable to meet my eyes. "And we've withdrawn the house listing." "Thank you," I replied, my voice neither triumphant nor condemning. This wasn't about victory. It was about justice and moving forward. By Monday, the court had officially invalidated the fraudulent power of attorney and confirmed my competency. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s, had glanced over her reading glasses at David. "You're fortunate your mother is more merciful than the Commonwealth might have been," she told him. "Elder fraud is something this court takes extremely seriously." Now, 2 months later, I sat in Rebecca Henderson's office at Golden Sunset, no longer as a resident, but as the owner conducting our regular business meeting. The winter sun streamed through the window, casting long shadows across the carpet. "The new West Wing renovations are on schedule," Rebecca reported, sliding a folder across the desk. "And occupancy rates are up 5% since last quarter." "Excellent," I nodded, reviewing the figures. "And how are our special residents doing?" Rebecca smiled, understanding my meaning. "Catherine continues to mentor our community legal aid program. Judge Simmons has started a memoir writing class, and Harriet is terrorizing everyone at poker night." I laughed, genuinely happy to hear about my friends. Though I'd moved back to my own home, I visited Golden Sunset several times a week, continuing the friendships that had sustained me during my unexpected residency. "And what about the new program?" I asked, referring to the initiative closest to my heart, one born from my own experience. "The Martha Wilson Elder Advocacy Program is officially launching next month," Rebecca confirmed. "We've already identified 3 residents who are experiencing financial pressure from family members. The legal team is stepping in to help them secure their assets and establish proper protections." Pride warmed me from within. Something good had come from my ordeal after all. A program to ensure other elderly individuals wouldn't face what I had. As we concluded our meeting, Rebecca hesitated. "David called again yesterday, asking if you'd be here today." My heart gave a small, painful twist. "What did you tell him?" "The truth, that I didn't know your schedule." She studied me carefully. "He's called every week for the past month." I nodded, gathering my belongings. "Thank you for letting me know." Outside, the January air was crisp and clear. I'd parked my car. Yes, I still drove, much to David's former consternation, near the main entrance. As I approached it, a familiar figure straightened from where he'd been leaning against the adjacent wall. "Mom," David said, his breath visible in the cold air. He looked different, thinner, less polished. The designer suit was gone, replaced by jeans and a simple wool coat. The Rolex was absent from his wrist. "David," I acknowledged, stopping a few feet away. "Rebecca mentioned you've been calling." He nodded, shoving his hands into his pockets. "I wasn't sure you'd talk to me if I called directly." He wasn't wrong. Since Thanksgiving, our communication had been limited to necessary legal matters, conducted primarily through Thomas. "How have you been?" I asked, unlocking my car but not getting in. Honest answer? Terrible. A rueful smile crossed his face. "Richard fired me the Monday after Thanksgiving. Most of my business contacts won't return my calls. We had to sell the house, legitimately this time. Melissa and I are separated. She's staying with her sister in Connecticut." I absorbed this information without comment. Actions had consequences. We both knew that. "Jenny told me about your advocacy program," he continued when I didn't respond. It's a good thing you're doing." "Thank you," I said simply, An awkward silence stretched between us, mother and son, connected by blood but separated by broken trust. "I've been seeing someone," David finally said. "A therapist, trying to understand why I—" He trailed off, then forced himself to continue. "Why I was willing to hurt you for money. And? Have you found any answers?" He looked down at the pavement. "Some. None that excuse what I did, but I'm trying to understand the man I became so I don't stay that person." He glanced up. "The therapist suggested I might have viewed Dad's money, what I thought was your money, as somehow already mine by right, an inheritance I was simply claiming early. That's not how inheritance works," I pointed out. "And it certainly isn't how respect works. I know that. Now." He sighed heavily. "I'm not asking for forgiveness, Mom. I don't deserve that yet. Maybe never. I wanted you to know I'm trying to be better. For the first time, I truly looked at my son, beyond the anger and hurt of his betrayal. I saw shadows under his eyes, new lines on his face, but I also saw something that had been missing before. Humility. What are you doing for work?" I asked. "I'm managing a small property downtown. Not as an owner, just an employee. The hours are long, the pay is modest, but it's honest work." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Turns out I did learn something useful from you and Dad after all." I nodded, processing this information. "And Jenny?" His expression softened. "She's amazing. Stronger than I ever gave her credit for. She's speaking to me again, barely. Says she'll consider forgiving me if I prove I've changed over time. Smart kid." "Yes," I agreed. "She takes after her grandmother." That earned a genuine, if brief, laugh from him. "Mom," he said, suddenly serious again, "I am so deeply sorry. Not just for what I did, but for who I became. Someone who could look at his own mother and see only dollar signs." His voice cracked. "I don't know if we can ever repair what I broke, but I want you to know I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of being your son again." Something shifted inside me. Not forgiveness, exactly, but perhaps its distant cousin. An openness to possibility. "There's a diner around the corner," I said after a long moment. "They make decent coffee. If you have time, we could talk a bit more." The hope that flared in his eyes was almost painful to witness. "I'd like that very much." As we walked together toward the diner, a careful distance between us, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. From the shock of betrayal on my birthday, to the triumph of Thanksgiving, and now to this tentative first step toward, what? Reconciliation? Understanding? I wasn't sure yet. What I did know was that I was no longer the victim in this story. I was its author. 3 months later, on a bright spring day, I celebrated my 74th birthday surrounded by friends in my garden. Catherine, Judge Simmons, Harriet, and other allies from Golden Sunset raised glasses of champagne as Jenny brought out a cake blazing with candles. "To Martha," Catherine toasted, "who taught us all that age isn't about growing weaker, but growing wiser." As laughter and conversation flowed around me, I noticed David standing slightly apart from the group, watching with uncertain eyes. I'd invited him, a small step in a long process. He'd been attending weekly counseling sessions, volunteering at an elder care center as part of his amends, and slowly rebuilding his relationship with Jenny. I made my way to him, 2 plates of cake in hand. "It's too nice a day to stand alone in the corner," I said, offering him a slice. He accepted it with a grateful smile. "Happy birthday, Mom. It's better than the last one." "Much," I agreed. "The new program at Golden Sunset helped another resident last week," he told me. "A woman whose nephew was pressuring her to add him to her accounts. Jenny's been volunteering with the advocacy team." Pride swelled in my chest for the program that was my legacy and for my granddaughter who understood its importance. "I've been thinking," I said carefully, "about the Wilson Properties portfolio. It's getting large enough that I could use some help with the administrative side, someone with property management experience." David stared at me, cake forgotten in his hand. "Mom, you don't have to. This isn't forgiveness packaged as a job offer," I clarified. "It's a business proposition. You have experience. You've demonstrated over the past 3 months that you're committed to change. And frankly, I'm not getting any younger, despite what that neurologist's report might say." A complex mix of emotions crossed his face: gratitude, unworthiness, hope. "I would never betray your trust again," he said quietly. "Never." "I know," I replied. "Because this time you'll be working with me, not behind my back. You'll learn the business properly from the ground up. And," I added with a small smile, "you'll be reporting to Jenny, who's starting as my assistant this summer. He laughed, a genuine sound that reminded me of the boy he'd been. My daughter as my boss, that seems like poetic justice. I thought so, I agreed. As we rejoined the party, I found myself addressing my invisible audience one last time. For those who have followed my journey from that fateful birthday to today, thank you for your support. If this story has touched you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Remember to subscribe to see more stories of resilience and justice. Sometimes the happiest endings aren't about perfect resolution, but about finding strength you never knew you had. Catherine caught my eye across the garden and raised an eyebrow. There you go again, talking to your invisible viewers. I smiled, serene in the knowledge that my story mattered, not just to me, but perhaps to others facing their own battles for dignity and respect. Just a habit, I replied. A reminder that our experiences don't exist in isolation, that speaking our truth can create ripples we never imagined. As the sun began to set on my birthday celebration, I looked around at the unlikely family I'd gathered, some related by blood, others by circumstance and choice. In betrayal, I'd found strength. In crisis, I'd found purpose. And in standing up for myself, I'd created something that would help others long after I was gone. The Martha Wilson who'd been abandoned at Golden Sunset on her birthday no longer existed. In her place stood a woman who owned not just buildings, but her own story, and who was determined to ensure others could do the same. As I blew out the candles on my cake, I made just one wish, that every person, regardless of age, would find the courage to declare, as I had finally learned to do, I am still here, I still matter, and I am not done yet. The end.
You know, before I end this video, I want to talk to you for a moment. Not as a narrator, not as someone telling a story, but just as someone sitting across from you, reflecting on what we just experienced together. Because stories like this, they don't just come and go, they stay. They linger in your mind, in your chest, in that quiet space where you start asking yourself questions you didn't expect. I remember the first time I came across a story like this. It wasn't dramatic in the way movies are. There were no grand speeches, no perfect endings, just the woman facing things that felt impossibly heavy. And yet, somehow she kept going. Not because she had all the answers, not because she wasn't afraid, but because something inside her refused to give up. And I think that's what makes stories like the one you just watched so powerful. It's not about perfection. It's not about always winning. It's about endurance. It's about what happens when the world tries to defy you, limit you, silence you, and you still choose to stand. Even if your voice shakes, even if your steps are slow. The women in these stories, they not just characters, they represent something real, something that has existed for generations, strength that has been passed down, even though pain, courage that show up, even when it feels like there's nothing left. And if you really think about it, how many times has that kind of strength gone unnoticed? How many stories were never told? How many voices were never heard? That's why this channel exists, to create a space where those stories are not just told but felt, where every moment of struggle matters, where every act of courage, no matter how small, is seen, and where rising again and again becomes something worth honoring. Maybe there was a moment in this story that hit you a little differently. Maybe it reminded you of someone you know. Maybe it reminded you of yourself. And if it did, I hope you hold on to that. Because strength doesn't always look like what we expect. Sometimes it looks like surviving one more day. Sometimes it looks like walking away. Sometimes it looks like starting over when everything in you is tired. But it's still strength and it still matters. So as you leave this video, don't just move on to the next thing right away. Sit with this for a second. Think about the journeys you just witnessed. Think about what it represents. And most importantly, remember that every story like this is the reminder of something powerful. That no matter how many times someone is pushed down, no matter how many systems try to break them, there is always the possibility of rising again. If this story meant something to you, I'd love for you to stay with us on this journey because there are so many more stories waiting. Stories that will challenge you, move you, and maybe even change the way you see the world just a little bit. Thank you for being here with me, truly. And until the next story, take care of yourself, keep your heart open, and never forget how powerful it is to rise, even when it's hard. Bye.